Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Fatboyz Dynasty podcast, presented by the Fantasyholics Podcast Network. Coming at you live in person on the YouTube channel. I'm Bo. That is Brant. Brant, good to be back. I know we had a week off last week. We were going to try to get some content out. I couldn't get myself to pull the laptop out while I was tanning my fat down in Florida. I know you had a hectic schedule with kids' sports. So we're going to do that episode today instead of having split episode that we were going to try to do last week. And it's all going to be good in the hood. We'll move on from it after this week. It's going to be a fun episode. Definitely glad to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. And with football rolling on, you had OTAs, mandatory camps going on. You're hearing the hype. You're hearing this guy looks great. This guy looks phenomenal. So that hype's starting to come. I think here shortly we're going to hopefully be able to break that down. Is it fact or fiction on a later episode? Today we do want to talk about some guys that are going to be deep dives in your startup leagues. And in some redraft leagues. Like these guys could really, really help in redraft leagues as well, but mainly in dynasty startups. So there'll be younger guys we'll be talking about and positions that maybe be slept on a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, with what you brought up, it's really fun to talk about coach speak because you never can tell. Some coaches, like Sean McVay, I think he's got one of the best track records with what he says genuinely tends to happen. And then there's a lot of other coaches that just can't trust what they say. So it's really fun to start like, oh, Raheem Morris came out. He's got the best time to get Bijan the ball is all the time. We'll see. A lot of these things are coming out right now, and it's just a lot of fun. You get excited. You start getting itchy. You start seeing some off-season trades that are maybe overpays because of somebody falls into some coaches speak. But yeah, it's definitely we're in the thick of getting fantasy relevant news right now, Brian.
Absolutely. So let's get our bids on.
Let's eat. All right, Brant. So for the most part, most rookie drafts at this point are kind of over with, or they're not happening until close to the season. I know I'm in a couple, you're in a couple that still haven't happened yet that are towards the end of this off season. But for the most part, most of them are done. And a lot of folks are starting to get into the startup, season, if you will. It's startup dynasty season. This is the point where we end up in those 30 leagues and we're like, how did that happen? It's because we got bored during the off season and had to start doing others. Some of us scratched that itch with best ball drafts. I know I've done my fair share of those already. I've deposited more than my fair share into Underdog and got busy on that this off season. Hopefully my wife's not watching. But anyway, for those of us that are not best ball guys and we want to do startups, Brant, it's time to start looking for those hidden gems. And you and I are both coming with 3 apiece today that are just guys that I think personally, all 6 of these names are, if you're drafting now, you get them much cheaper than you do come August or September. I think news is going to start coming out on all these players. These guys are going to start going up a little bit higher in drafts. But right now, these guys are draft steals, Brant.
Absolutely. You spoke on the Underdog. Right now, I believe Underdog, I'd have to double check it, but I just saw it pop up on my notifications. They're allowing you to do 8 picks for 320 times your amount that you place down on it. So get on there and see that. It's only for a limited time. They are doing that. Underdog's a great place to be doing over-unders for season values. I know you and me love that. Come here in a couple months. We'll be sitting down and breaking that down. So make sure you guys check out Underdog. But yeah, these late round draft picks, these are some guys that you talk about best ball. You maybe grab with your last pick in best ball. Next thing you know, these guys are hanging 20 points, 20, 25 points every 3 weeks or every 4 weeks. And you're like, held up. I remember I drafted this guy. Let me go check my lineup. Oh, look at that. All of a sudden I'm in first because I've got 3 guys busting out for 25, 30 points a week.
Yeah. And again, that's the thing with best ball. Sometimes a guy like Gabe Davis is frustrating to own, Brant, in regular leagues. But sometimes in a best ball league, he's a lot of fun because you don't have to worry about putting him in your lineup on the weeks he gets 0. You only want him in the lineups for the weeks he gets 60, and that's pretty easy to obtain in this landscape. So, all right. But anyway, let's talk about this. And Brant, you and I shared some names, our 3 names apiece before we got started. Let's talk about, we both came up with a player from the same position, different players from the same position, same team. So can we start with our Green Bay Packer wide receivers, Brant, first? I know yours is a little bit further down in ADP, so I'm going to let you go with him first. Talk about your guy, and then we'll talk about my guy, and then we'll talk about why we think this team could substantiate several weapons.
Yeah, this is actually going to be my last one to talk about because he is my lowest, my deepest, my furthest dive. And that is, can you tell me who was the first Green Bay wide receiver to break 100 yards this year, and it took all the way to week 17? I know you can tell me because you know who my guy is, but he was the first one, Green Bay wideout this year, to break 100 yards. It took all the way to week 17. I think it was Watson had 92 or Dobbs did one week, and that was the next closest. He broke out. This is Bo Melton. It took him until week 17 to go over 100 yards. His last 3 weeks of the season, he had 22 targets and 15 receptions, plus, the 100-yard game and the touchdown there. He had a touchdown in the game against San Francisco in the playoffs. This guy's got burning 4.3 speed. He's been turning heads at camp. He's got a solid work ethic. Like, that's one of the biggest things that coaches are saying about him. His work ethic is there. His work ethic. He's just always ready to get on the grind. He's ready to work. This guy is going as the 330th player off the board in Superflex startup drafts. He is 25 years old. I know the target competition there in Green Bay is a bunch. But at 330, this guy could easily slide himself into the number 2 or 3 role. And then all of a sudden you have a flex or a wide receiver 3 that you drafted in the very last pick of your draft. Mm-hmm. This is a guy you just sit back. He's 25 years old, and he could just go to work. He, like I said, he's turning heads at camp. And I do think that he was turning heads at the end of last year. And I don't think this is the Gabe Davis playoff. Oh, got to draft him in the 4th round. No, this is a guy that just kind of slid under the radar at the end of the year. And he's looking phenomenal. He looked phenomenal to end the year. And now he's already starting to turn some heads in camp.
Yeah. And again, I think Bo Melton, the fun thing with him is we're talking about him maybe being a super steal. He was on your Seattle Seahawks roster 2 years. Didn't even scratch the field. So definitely starting to trend in the right direction. And Brant, I think it's important and it's imperative to remember, we look at these rookie wide receivers nowadays and we expect production year 1. And if they don't, a lot of us start dropping these guys from our fantasy rosters. But if you think back just 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, these guys took 2-3 years to develop. It wasn't come into the league and hit the ground running. Really, with the exception of like Justin Jefferson, there's been very few guys that have come out year 1 and just overperformed. So maybe, a guy like Bo Melton's one of those guys that it is going to take him a couple of years before he catches his feet and gets going. Here we go. We're getting into that 3rd year. It's time to see what he's got. My Packer wide receiver I want to talk about, Brant, is a guy that's going right now, currently the 6th pick in the 13th round, 163.6 is his current ADP on the Sleeper app. That's Dontavian Wicks, the 6'1", 208-pound wide receiver going into his 2nd year in Green Bay. And again, Brant, very similar to Bo Melton, this guy balled out the last 4 weeks of the season. He did miss week 17, so he wasn't on the field with Bo Melton for that performance. But in the last 3 weeks that he played, which was week 15, 16, and 18, he was wide receiver 20, 38, and 5, respectively. And the thing that I love most about Dontavian Wicks, Brant, is he led the entire National Football League last year in creating separation and man coverage. You tell me that a guy like Jordan Love, a guy like Matt LaFleur is not going to figure this out and say that guy needs to start getting the ball quite a bit more often. This is a guy, he's going to be a quarterback's best friend when a play breaks down because he's going to have a knack and be able to find a way to get open. He's going to start demanding more playing time. And let's be honest, Brant, we've talked about this Green Bay Packers team a lot in the past years. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jalen Reed, Bo Melton, and then Dontayvion Wicks. None of these guys have really stepped up and said, hey, I'm planting the flag as the wide receiver one in this offense, and I'm going to be that guy. If I had to put money on one of them to be that guy, it's still Christian Watson for me, just because he is the most super freak, but he can't stay healthy. He can't stay on the field. And so for that reason, there's always going to be a constant influx of these other wide receivers getting involved. And somebody eventually is going to be the guy. And I think you and I have got some names, and especially when you talk about dart throws towards the end of the draft, these are guys that are paired with a quarterback that, yes, I know the sample size isn't as big as some others, but 1 year of Love was pretty darn good last year. And if one of these guys even if one of these guys comes out and is the clear, maybe not athletic enough to be the clear number one on a roster, maybe they're good enough to be a number two, and they're keeping themselves on the field pretty routinely, then there's going to be some fantasy relevancy coming out of that player, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the receiving room is so wide open. You're betting Christian Watson. I'm betting Jalen Reed might be the wide receiver one just because he can play all three positions. He can move around the formation, his speed. So it's that receiving room is that wide open that everyone has their own personal opinion. And that's where this is going to start fluctuating. But you're going to see the personal opinions of being Reed, Dobbs, and Watson will be the top three names. So these two names right here are definitely guys that late in the draft you're going to be able to throw darts. And I honestly believe as hype comes on, these are two names that you may see because they do fly so far under the radar. These may slide down in drafts as other people's names like a Darnell Mooney or this other guy I'm about to talk about start to catch some camp hype.
Absolutely. I agree. All right, Brent, go ahead with your next player.
I'm going to stay in the same position. That's wide receiver. This is Jalen Tolbert. He was huge, had all this camp hype, preseason hype last year going into the season, then just didn't do much on that team. Well, you had Michael Gallup come back. You had Brandon Cooks. You had CeeDee Lamb. You had Tony Pollard. You had Jake Ferguson. You had them all balling out for that team. Well, this year, Michael Gallup's gone. I know Lamb's still there. Ferguson's still there. Pollard's gone. You got 97-year-old Brandon Cooks still on the roster, and you have Ezekiel Elliott re-signing, and then you got Tiny Tim, Deuce Vaughn. And that's really about it. So in the pecking order, you're looking at CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, and then maybe Jalen Tolbert here. Maybe Brandon Cooks takes the step and stays above him this year. Well, Tolbert's 25 years old. All three of my guys two of my three guys are 25 years old here. And he just got to get on the field consistently. Tolbert, he's like I said, he should be third or fourth in the pecking order. And this is an offense that was third in passing yards last year as a team, eighth in attempts, and first in passing touchdowns. And you know, at 25 years old, he's going off as the 258th player off the board. And Michael Gallup's gone. He should easily slide into that number 2/3 role. And this guy's got some good hands. And like I said, he had a great preseason. I think this is a guy that's going to be going late in drafts. I think this is a guy you're going to get a lot of hype out of camp, and it's going to slowly move him up boards. So the earlier you get him for startups, the better.
Yeah, again, that's another name, Brant, that I think, like you just mentioned, as we get closer and closer, they're going to start talking about how good the connection between Dak and Tolbert looks. And people are going to start buying into that and hyping him up. And next thing you know, he's going to be getting drafted as like the 30th wide receiver off the board instead of like the 80th wide receiver off the board. So that camp talk, that coach speak, those things are all very real. And like you said, if you're drafted now, what better dart throw to take than a guy like Tolbert who could instantly be the number two in a pretty high-powered passing offense in Dallas, especially like you mentioned, the running game's not going to be that illustrious in Dallas this year. Dak's going to be airing it out a decent amount, and that leaves plenty of targets for a guy like Jalen Tolbert.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, Brant, you knew this one was coming. This is one of my favorite guys of the offseason. I think he's being absolutely slept on, disrespected. I can understand why there's the disrespect and the disconnect between the community of fantasy footballers and the player himself. However, I am still a sucker for him. I've got my flag in him, just kind of like you did with Rashad Bateman and what you kind of did with Kenny Golladay. Hopefully my flag just ends up being a little bit brighter colored at the end of this than yours has been to this point.
Bateman got an extension.
This guy is currently going as the 8th pick in the 12th round, so still not super far down. But this is Quentin Johnston, the 6'4", 215-pound, second-year wide receiver out of the Los Angeles Chargers. First and foremost, Brant, the first thing I want to bring up is there's 395 vacated targets on this offense and this team from the likes of Austin Eckler leaving, Mike Williams leaving, and Keenan Allen leaving. That's quite a bit of big names targets. I know last year Quentin Johnston still had some issues with drops and things of that nature, but he is going with a coach who has seen him firsthand on the good side of his football playing. If you remember 2 years ago when TCU, Max Duggan and Quentin Johnston came out and just absolutely poo-pooed all over the Michigan Wolverines in the college football playoff. Those guys are both actually on this Chargers team. So Harbaugh has both of them. But Harbaugh has seen what Quentin Johnston can do. His competition, listen, Joshua Palmer's fine. I think Ladd McConkey's got a chance to be really good. But that's still pretty shallow competition. I still think there's definitely plenty of room for Quentin Johnston to walk in. He's got to get the drops under control, Brant, but to walk in and be the clear-cut number one in this offense, big-bodied guy, be used in the red zone. And let's not forget, he's got a pretty elite quarterback in Justin Herbert as well. I think this season you could be talking about a resurgence of Quentin Johnston's career. Again, if you believe in coach speak, the GM's coming out speaking on Quentin Johnston. Harbaugh has come out and said they all think he's going to take a huge leap this year, which again, what he did last year to even a mediocre year this year would be a pretty big jump. So it doesn't have to be super big. But again, if you're talking a back half of the 12th round and you're potentially getting a wide receiver 1, that's pretty darn good value. And I do believe the rookie Ladd McConkey, who's never taken a snap in the NFL, is being drafted over him right now in Dynasty startups. So again, Brant, plenty of opportunity here. I don't know who else you're drafting in the 12th round that's got a chance to be a potential wide receiver 1 for their respective team.
Well, the next guy I'm going to talk about is in the 12th round, but he's not a wide receiver. But yeah, as for Quentin Johnston, I believe that it's do or die time there and for the Chargers. I do know it's only a second year. They added McConkey, they added Rice, they kept Palmer, they added Vidal, and Gus Edwards there, and they added to that offensive line, and they're ready to get in the trenches and they're ready to go to work. And excuse me, if you remember, Herbert was on the IR for most of the season last year, banged up before he went to the IR. Mm-hmm. He really didn't have the 100% Justin Herbert. I know if you look at ratings and all that, Quentin Johnston's near the bottom of that last year. He may have been possibly one of the worst wide receivers in certain ratings. But I do see that getting better this year, and I do like him in the 12th round. You're not probably getting a better chance at a wide receiver 1 on a team that late in drafts. Excuse me. So my next guy is actually going at the 12-9, the 155th overall player, and he could be the RB1 on his team, and he's only 24 years old. Right now he's listed as the number 2 running back. But if you remember, the running back in front of him suffered a devastating knee injury that was gruesome and could take longer than a year to come back. And the guy I'm talking about is Jerome Ford. He finished as a top 24 running back 12 times last year. He was the best running back on that team, and he only had 4 rushing touchdowns. Yes, he did add 5 receiving touchdowns to go with it. But still, this is a guy that could step in. Nick Chubb, I don't think is going to be ready to begin the season. And I don't know if he will be 100% this season. So Jerome Ford's a guy that's going in the 12th round that could be the RB1. He's, like I said, Nick Chubb's on his last year of his deal. So if he does come out and he is not 100% and there's anything lingering, Cleveland cuts ties with him with no problem whatsoever. And then they have Jerome Ford and probably can get Jerome Ford extended for even cheaper than keeping Nick Chubb. So let's run over a few of his stats here. Let's see. He had 5 receiving touchdowns in 2023, 63 targets, 44 receptions, 204 rushing attempts, And like I said, he's going as a running back 43. Well, he finished well above that last year. And this is a guy that, like I said, I just think he'll be starting the season as the number one there. And this is a guy that they're going to lean on in the backfield until they do get 100% Nick Chubb. And this is an offense this is a team. I don't even want to say offense. This is a team that is looking to take a step forward. And in that division, you think about it, you see Joe Burrow. What are you going to do? You're going to try to run to keep the ball away from that offense. See Lamar Jackson. What are you going to do? You got to run to keep the ball away from him. You see both of those teams twice. Nobody wants to talk about Pittsburgh because nobody knows what's going to go on in Pittsburgh. But you want to keep the ball out of Burrow and Lamar Jackson's hands. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing you want in Cleveland is they will lean on the run.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, too, part of what people don't think about with Jerome Ford, Brant, is when you talk about the Cleveland Browns offense and how good it is and how good their run game is and how good of a head coach Kevin Stefanski is when it comes to running the ball, people get excited when you talk about Nick Chubb, right? Why not get excited about Jerome Ford when you take Nick Chubb and you pull him right out of that picture? Because, again, Brant, you and I aren't doctors, so I don't want to say something that I can't prove to be true. But I do have a pair of eyes, and I do know that the TV took that and refused to show replays of Nick Chubb's injury last year because of how gruesome it was and how bad it was. And last I heard about Nick Chubb, he was still walking around in one of those leg braces. So, this could be a thing, again, for Nick Chubb's sake. I hope that he's able to come back. I wish him nothing but success. Obviously, Nick Chubb's too good of a guy for anybody to hold ill wills to. Unless maybe you're like a Alabama, Baltimore Ravens fan, then maybe you don't like Nick Chubb. But again, Brant, you're talking about a guy in the 12th round who, again, running back one, if Chubb isn't healthy, probably at the very worst, the best handcuff in the National Football League because of the simple fact that there's no guarantee Chubb plays and there's no guarantee he plays much. He may be healthy all year, but they may only use him in a 40-60 split, maybe because Ford was not great in the red zone. Maybe they put Chubb in near the goal line. We don't know what that's going to look like. So, yeah, again, in the 12th round, getting a snag of that offense, I think that's definitely well worth the gamble on whoever's in it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, my last player is also of the running back nature. This is another player that I've gotten very, very high head of steam for here in recent weeks, Brant, and that is the former alluded to player that you talked about, Kimani Vidal, out of the Los Angeles Chargers. And Brant, the reason I'm so infatuated with Vidal is a lot of different reasons. Well, first of all, he's 5'8", 215 pounds, so a bowling ball player. He's a rookie, right? So for those of us that have leagues that have taxis, you get to stash him. He's currently going as the 6th pick in the 14th round. So just a few picks behind Jerome Ford. But this kid was an absolute bell cow the last 2 years at the University of Troy. And I know it's Troy, so it's not real easy to get excited for. But the last 2 years, 528 carries, 2,793 yards, 24 rushing touchdowns, Brant, which was good enough to get him drafted, I believe, in the 6th round of the actual NFL draft. He goes into a run-first offense with Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh is he did it in college. He did it when he was in San Francisco. He sets the game up with the run. He runs the ball. Then he runs the ball some more, and then he play action passes, right? And when you talk about the names in front of him, there's no Nick Chubb in front of Kimani Vidal. You might want to close your ears for this, Brant, but on the depth chart, there's a completely broken, dismantled down, rusted version of J.K. Dobbins. There's Gus Edwards, who had 400 touchdowns last year for Baltimore in front of him, who also has had a career of question marks with injuries. And then Isaiah Spiller, who already Vidal is listed in front of on the depth chart. Those are not names that scare me, Brant. They really don't when it comes to drafting a guy behind somebody. I know you and I just had a rookie draft on a team that we co-owned. We took over an orphan team. We got Vidal in like the 3rd round, and you and I were extremely excited about it just because the path is there for this guy to get work early. Because let's be honest, Gus Edwards isn't a bell cow. J.K. Dobbins isn't a bell cow. Isaiah Spiller is not a bell cow. So even if it's just 30% of the snaps that Vidal's getting year one, they're going to be good snaps because it's a good offense with Herbert and Harbaugh. They're gonna run a good system there. And I believe Greg Roman's the offensive coordinator, who already is familiar with Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, so he already knows how crappy Dobbins is. Again, sorry, earmuffs. I know that's one of your boys. But I just think the path for Kamani Vidal to get early work, and again, when you're talking the 12th round, getting a steal on a guy like Jerome Ford, the 14th round, getting a guy like Kamani Vidal in a dynasty league, who I think will have early work this year as well as potentially be the starter next year in this offense, that's definitely worth a stab, in my opinion, Brandon.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talk about a guy, Gus Edwards, he had 13 rushing touchdowns. With 13 rushing touchdowns, you think what, RB 15 or above? It's probably where he should have finished. We only had 198 total carries. You alluded to not being able to be a bell cow. He finished as an RB 25 with 13 rushing. With 13 rushing touchdowns, he finished as the RB 25. So obviously not very efficient. He played in all 17 games as well. He did have 4 yards per carry, but he wasn't as efficient in getting fantasy points. So you're absolutely right. He wasn't efficient for that offense. He was just a bruiser at the goal line. At 5 yards and in, I went to a Ravens game last year. And anytime they were within 5 yards, it was, oh, here comes Gus Edwards. And he rushes for 5 yards and scores a touchdown. Well, that's how you get an average of 4 yards per carry. Anything outside of the 5, it wasn't very efficient. So Gus Edwards isn't efficient. You got me still praying that Dobbins will come back, and everything he's saying about being fully healthy is right. But you have the shell of J.K. Dobbins, and then you have Vidal. He's right there, easy for the taking. This is a guy that could be on one of the run heaviest offenses in the NFL this year. Yeah, they were 20th last year, but it's a whole new staff. They could end up being the most run heavy offense in the NFL this year.
Absolutely. So again, Brant, I think all 6 of these names that we talked about, 2 from the Chargers, 2 from the Packers, 1 from the Cowboys, and 1 from the Browns. These guys are all names that I think as you start getting, super deep coach speak, if you will, super deep practice stuff, training camp stuff. These are names that are going to start creeping up the boards because it's going to come out about how good the connections look between quarterback and wide receiver, or Jerome Ford's taking 60% of the first team reps, whatever the case may be. These things are going to start creeping up, and these players' values are going to start skyrocketing. So again, if your league's drafting now, get these players now, even if you don't necessarily love them. Trade them to somebody else who buys into coach speak as the offseason goes. I know drafting players just to trade them is not necessarily the greatest thing either. I don't mean to say that to do for research. When you're talking a 20th round and you're staring down a guy like Jalen Tolbert, pull the trigger. What's the worst that can happen? You drop him. There's going to be a lot of guys you drop in the 20th round or pick in the 20th round that are probably going to be drops.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're getting these guys to trade away, then okay, cool. So what are you going to do? You're going to trade them for a second or third round draft pick next year. And you're going to build that youth for your team. So if you decide to go veteran heavy in your startup at the front end of the draft, you go a CMC, you go Cooper Kupp, or you start to go very veteran heavy. Well, then you start trading some of your younger guys for draft picks to start building and start that rebuild early. So it's absolutely a great idea to take that option there late in the draft.
I agree, Brent. So anyway, I think that covers it. Those are some really good names to keep an eye on. If you're starting to do some startup drafts, maybe even some best balls, maybe you take some stabs at some of these guys in best ball drafts. Because we're in the full swing of the drafting season, if you will, for us Dynasty folks. And again, these are names to keep an eye on, Brant.
Yeah, absolutely. These are names that are going to be creeping. There's plenty more out there. So we'll probably, come out. We'll talk about some more names later as we get into our research a little deeper and everything else. But as for today, as always, stay hungry.
Stay fat, my friends.